pleasure tonight to be talking with André Leon Talley about the beautiful new book, John Galliano for Dior, with photographs by Robert Farrar. So before anything else, I'm going to take one picture forward so you can see what we're going to be talking about. Now, André, you've known John for years, and you were really instrumental in helping him when he was at rock bottom.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that period?
Well, John was on the radar in Paris, and he was, before he fell rock bottom, he had extraordinary shows doing the ready-to-wear, and one of my friends who was an editor at French Vogue said, you got to go to a John Galliano show. And it was one extraordinary show where he had, the clothes were like slips, lingerie, and in the middle of the show, they just cut pillows open and feathers flew all down the runway. And it was just magical. And then I met John, and he had a last show at Plan Sud, and then I called him, and he said, well, I don't have a backup. Plan Sud took the money away. He was sleeping on the floor. Stephen Robinson, who's deceased, he was his best friend, and he was his closest friend in his work and collaborator. And John said, well, we're not having any money, we're not doing a show. And I said, what's going on? And he said, I'm sleeping on Stephen's floor. And I said, but you got to do a show, because the last show you did with Plan Sud was so extraordinary, which, by the way, was a show that was one of the most seminal moments in fashion, where all the models, Christy Turlington, Linda Evangelista, Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss, and it was a show that was based on the theme of the aristocrats were at the Winter Palace in Russia, and they were leaving Russia, escaping the revolution, going by way of Scotland to a grouse hunt, and then ended up in Ascot in the 30s. So that is a
typical John narrative.
This is a typical John narrative. And at that moment, John was, his muse was Amanda Harlock, who lived in Wales and England and Shropshire. And she would write these things and send them to him, and that would become the narrative for the show, the concept. And that show I went to, and it was just the most magical thing I thought I'd ever seen. And before I went to the show, I had come from Milan one night, late one night, and we usually took the plane right after Versace was the last show. And I said to Anna Winter, well, I'll drop you at the Ritz. We shared a car. And I'm going on to this atelier of Mr. Galliano to see what he's doing. It's a preview. And then at this show, this was the Winter Palace show. John, it was the 10:30 at night, and I went into this place, this cold atelier. It was almost like a Dickens atmosphere. And Stephen and John were in this small room doing a fitting. And they were heating up their dinner on Bunsen burners, those things to light up like a candle. And in the corner was this most extraordinary fitting for a crinoline. It was a think of Gone with the Wind when Scarlett O'Hara has on her underskirts, not the real clothes. But it was a lame, sort of a silk nylon lame, but it was mounted on the most extraordinary construction of hoops that he had bought at Galeries Lafayette, the Paris department store. And they were some sort of modern plastic inner tubes or something. But they were light as feathers. And so this was a very huge skirt, huge, enormous thing. But the reason he got these hoops, these extraordinary hoops, were it made the skirt light and it just floated. So when the girls walked, the dresses just went up and down like they were kites in the sky. They just moved beautifully. It was almost like Japanese or Loa Fuller in movement. And Amanda Harlock decided that she would have, on top of these huge crinolines, little tiny camel soles destroyed already. They were like dipped in tea. They were torn, ragged, and lace, exquisite Irish lace, dipped in tea. And they went with the crinolines, and there were Manolo Blahnik, silver lame mules. Every model had silver lame mules. And then this was the beginning with the hoops. And the girls had, powdered hair. And then he ended up in Ascot with maxi coats like Russian officers with, mini skirts and Manolo mules. And this is when this man named Plansu took the money from him. And so I was living in Paris at the time, working for American Vogue, and I said to Anna Winter, something's got to happen because John needs to have a show. And she said, well, do whatever you have to do. And fortunately, I knew a man in New York who was at Payne Weber, you know, the money place. And this man, his name was John Bolt, and I had met him. And John had come to New York. That winter, Anna sent him a coach ticket. He came to New York for the holiday season. It was the year of Schindler's List. And I remember John and I went to a screening of Schindler's List on the West Side. And he had his hair all powdered white. Well, actually, it was not powder. It was like paste. It was all sort of damp and pasty and white and sort of knickers and things. And then Mortimer's, which is now gone, gave a dinner party for John, for myself and John, in his restaurant. And Iman came and Mr. Bolt came, a mutual friend, and Mr. Bolt came and met John. And then the next weekend, Mr. Bolt said, do you think I should come to Paris and have a meeting with you and John? And I said, of course you should. So he took the Concorde. Concorde was still flying. John Bolt took the Concorde to Paris, and on a Saturday afternoon, he met with me at the Bristol Hotel, which is a fabulous hotel in Paris. We sat in the lobby of the Bristol Hotel and had a drink, and he said, how much money do you need to get John rebooted? How much money do you think it needs? And I said, well, I don't know anything about this. He says, well, I'm willing to give you all the money you need if John Galliano is willing to do this. And so then I said, well, go back to New York and come back next week, and then connect me with your lawyers and we'll figure it out. So then in the middle of the week, John and I had to go to see this man's lawyer in Paris. And John was speechless, comatose. He couldn't speak. He couldn't speak. And to make a long story short, Mr. Bolt gave us $50,000. And with $50,000, we had this great show at the late Madame Schlumberger's house in March of 1994, which was an extraordinary show. It was a seminal show that recreated fashion in the late 20th century. And all the models volunteered. They gave their services. Manolo made the shoes for free. Amanda Harlick was the stylist. Linda Evangelista, Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, Nadia Aroman. And Madame Schlumberger gave us her house. She'd moved out across town. The house was empty. It was a very fabulous house, 3 stories. And so we mounted the whole thing there, and we invited the Tout Paris to the opening, and this is what made John Galliano very famous. And then he went on to get the job at Givenchy. He had the Givenchy job. And from Givenchy came Dior, and from Dior came the legacy that you see here. And this is the second show of John in the Bagatelle Gardens, and that's Stella Tennant. And let's just give credit to Robert Farah for taking this beautiful picture.
I mean, it's such a beautiful picture.
And this is what this book is about. It's about the audace of beauty, and John was always about the audace. This was I think a spring show, wasn't it, Robert? That's right. Spring. Now, in spring, are you going to wear gray tweed? Inspired by the Dior,
bar suit, inspired by
the bar suit, and the skirts are to the floor. And this was in spring, in July, in the Bagatelle Gardens. And there's Stella Tennant. Her hair is inspired by the Native American Indians. Her necklace is inspired by African jewelry. And the suit is the bar suit inspired by Dior, referencing the jacket, the exquisite tailoring, and the beauty of Dior workmanship. But all the skirts were to the floor. And this is supposed to be a day suit for lunch. But this is the romantic power and the romantic audace of John Galliano, because he always broke the rules and it always made sense. And this was one of the great shows. But the first show of Mr. Galliano for Dior, I think, was in the Dior Couture house. The Dior Couture house. But this is the second show. And that's Stella Tennant, who was one of John's favorite models. And I can't remember what this show is from, but who is that model, Robert?
That's Kate Moss.
Is that Kate Moss? Wow.
That's the boudoir mood.
Oh, boudoir.
All the models were.
Well, whatever. John and Amanda thought like cinema. They were cinematic narratives. She was living, and she would go. I went to do a photo shoot with Amanda Harlick. This is when I first met her. And John was not working, and I was sent by Anna to go photograph Amanda Hollick in a house in Wales, some mansion, some crumbling grand mansion. And, she was on horses, and we had Dior dresses, then designed by Mr. Ferret. We had a beautiful red coat, and the whole coat took over the whole hind of the horse. And there were a few Galliano moments that were sent over by air for this photo shoot. And in the middle of the shoot one day, Amanda's on the beach in between shoots, and she's walking around picking up broken glass. I said, what are you doing with this, picking up the broken glass? Why are you picking up this, where you find things on the beach, the mess on the beach, trash. And she was putting it in a box. And I said, why are you putting the glass in a box? What is that for? She said, I'm putting this in a box to send to John in Paris because these are the colors that will be the colors in the collection from this broken glass, this found glass on the beach. This is the way they work. And Amanda has read at Cambridge or Oxford, so she's very well read. And see, she would write the narrative, and John would then create the narrative through his own research. I mean, there would be Boldini, you'd go into the studio, you'd see huge reproductions of Boldini, huge reproductions of Sargent. What is that saying?
It says
Dior. What a great detail. What a great detail.
John went everywhere from Edwardian a la Mr.
Absolutely,
Dior
yes.
to this kind of superfly, amazing jewelry.
Yes. He loved the world he lived in. He loved the day, the real time. So he loved the street. And he loved the fact that people were at that point wearing, maybe perhaps he saw a picture of Mary J. Blige. She had a ring that said, fly or something. And that's what he interpreted. But it was always done with such beauty and romanticness. It was always romantic. John was never vulgar. Nothing in his work is ever vulgar. It's very shocking sometimes, but it makes sense because it's been thought out and it's been carried out.
We have to go back to the leather one.
Oh, now let me just look. This is the genius of Robert Farrar. He's backstage at a Dior show, and he is there to capture the beauty, the instant total beauty of, don't think that Pat McGrath has not worked with about 80 books to get that face inspired. She's been inspired by Picasso, Magritte, books. She's been inspired by pictures of Avedon, Irving Penn, to get that maquillage.
Well, and this collection, this 2000 collection is really one of my very, very favorites. Yeah. This was the Freud or Fetish collection.
The Freud or Fetish collection. And there she has this she's almost a fetish with a handbag with a horse tail. Yeah. And it's also very Edwardian in its own way. But the curves, what's great about the photograph is you see the beautiful construction of those bias, almost silhouetting fluid seams in the jacket, the collar, and then you have this beautiful sleeve going into these long hands in white nails, and this amazing bridle bit from the hat over to the saddlebag.
Well, and the fact that Robert's doing this backstage, which was still relatively new then, that allow photographers backstage, you had to trust them.
Yes. Well, the point with Robert was that he was always welcome backstage because he had such great manners.
Yes.
So he wasn't a bully, he wasn't aggressive, he was just a very polite person. He'd been brought up with proper upbringing, and all the models loved him. And Vogue, Anna Wintour, we adored the pictures, and I adored working with Robert because I didn't have to tell him what to do. I just sort of sat back there and absorbed the beauty and watched the details fly by me.
Could whoever is back there flash to the previous one, because it's not going back, and I want to show everybody the previous image. There. Yeah. Okay, also from Freud and Fetish, and we've got that wonderful corset hat right now in the exhibition, Paris, Capital of Fashion.
Wow. And you see that satin thing is almost fetishy, saddle-y. It's a jacket. And it's so beautifully worked. And I think Madonna might have had something from that collection. I think. And just look at the makeup. Every detail has been painstakingly gone over for each and every model. I mean, hours of work with Pat McGrath, research, conversations. It's not just done on a storyboard moment. And John is there nervous, quivering around everything. It's very, very, very intense what he did, what he does.
It's so exquisite. I mean, that red, sexy satin, it's so demonically beautiful.
And beautifully executed at the Dior workrooms.
Okay. If you can go ahead, too, because the clicker's not working again. Next one. Okay. Same collection. This is, I guess, the French maid. Yeah. There were all of these sort of iconic fetish types in the show.
And you know, there was a trend at that moment in fashion where couture even had the moment of destroy and deconstruct. So you notice their frayed edges.
Yes.
Chanel also did beautiful couture dresses in chiffon with these unfinished, frayed, destroyed edges. And this is a very high moment of achievement with Mr. Galliano. And so is the makeup is integral to the whole message of originality, authenticity, and you've never seen it before.
So, and this collection was in 2000, autumn, winter. So Robert's book covers from 1997 to 2008,
Yes.
which is sort of like the ultimate
Yes.
high point
Yes.
of John
at Dior.
At Dior. Can we get the next one, please? Okay,
This has got to be ready to wear, isn't it?
I believe so. It's a Cadillac collection.
It's got to be ready to wear.
Yeah. And with the bag, which of course was one of the
Yeah.
one of the many
Yes.
famous
Yes.
designs
Yes.
that he was so brilliant with all the accessories.
Yeah. Again, the makeup, Dane McGrath, the makeup. And look at the shirt. Oh, I mean, is it a jacket or is it a shirt or a T-shirt? Yes, it's both. Well, anyway, it's got Paris, a license plate up there on the shoulder. Everything. And these girls loved posing for Robert in his backstage. Between going out on the runway, they had fun posing for Robert.
And of course, they're so telling. The backstage photos are often just so
the
revealing.
the best.
Plus, it was super fun actually to be backstage
Yes.
at Dior.
Yeah, it was.
More fun even than being
On the front row, yeah.
Get the next one?
That's got to be ready to wear as well.
Yep, this was Dior Rave.
Yes, rave being, you know, part of the whole funk hip-hop influence. And the colors are wonderful. The punk ring in the lips, the purple hair, the sunglasses Dior, which it must have sold thousands of. Very expensive. You know, John had a team, and they all put together everything. It was a whole big team in the studio, in the atelier. He and Stephen, and they just, to see them work on shows was just amazing, to go visit them doing previews.
Let's get the next one.
J'adore Dior.
Yes, which of course,
Again, ready to wear.
that became the slogan, though.
Yes,
I mean, that was
yes.
on absolutely everything.
Yes. And again, there is that very high punk street influence of John. But at the same time, John always wanted things to look exquisite, exquisitely made, exquisite details, the dripping Dior logos on the T-shirt. It's all inspired by street or influences that John loved.
Next one.
This is
back to
couture.
couture,
This is
definitely.
grand couture. I think these are the Russian dolls, aren't
It's
they?
a Trans-Siberian Express.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, right.
Well, John and Stephen went all the way to Russia for about 3 weeks. And then they came back with photographs in albums. And in the studio, they had huge leather-bound albums of everything they'd seen that they loved. And they'd photograph buildings, they'd gone into museums, they photographed soldiers, and they mixed it all up, and out comes this extraordinary look of, what is it called?
Trans-Siberian
Excess. And look at the girl with the gold beard, the filigree beard, and the double eyelashes.
It's so fabulous.
This is the most original that you could get in Paris. I mean, no one else was doing things like this in Paris, ever.
No.
John never was influenced by anyone. He influenced others, but they could never get to this level. Now, whether the clients ordered the jacket that way, I doubt that many clients did. But they had the joy of maybe looking at it and modifying it.
Yes. Yes. Next one.
Very again, on Munster Street, this is one of my favorite collections because the accessories were important, and Dior wants to push the accessory in the boutique. And there is that great Dior saddleback, which they're still selling today.
Yeah.
You know, it's a saddle turns into a bag with a Dior thing for the feet. And that is what you would call, I guess, a punky, mohawky hat.
Yes, taken from those Peruvian hats
Oh, yes.
you could buy on the street,
Yes.
but with the mohawk.
Yes. And I think there's something down there like a fur shoe.
Fur shoe.
Yeah.
And lots of inspiration mixed up. You can see lots of Latin American in
Yes,
that
influences,
one,
yes.
but also India and Tibet, Mongolia.
He was great for mixing the cultures. And there is the girl looking at herself in the mirror. She's just amazed at the way she looks. And that sexy bustier and that thing on her head.
It's a great backstage shot. Next one.
Well, this is amazing. This is also, what is this called?
This one is from New Glamour.
Oh, my goodness. Was this in... was this in Versailles or not?
No, not this one. A little bit later. We'll
Okay,
get there.
but when you look at the hat and the girl of the big fox, the big coyote or whatever,
Yeah.
it's a totem.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's so amazing. It's excess to a point of complete genius.
And, at one point, if we show it at Versailles, they had the hats like that. And one day I was with Anna in the House of Dior, and I said to John was there to fit a coat for her dress. And I said, where's that extraordinary hat? It looks something like that. And it weighed about 80 pounds. And I said, I want to try that hat on. And so I had to bring the hat down, and I was sitting there, and Anna would have turned around. She said, André, what are you thinking? And it was a really heavy hat. I did not get the hat, please.
Well, and then her hat, the girl in the black feathers, that reminds me of when he did that communist collection, which had all of the military regalia.
But you see, that coat is exceptional because that coat is also inspired by something otherworldly in the 19th century, Belle Epoque, Edwardian, and it's just excessively extravagant.
Yeah.
Yet she's got on a communist hat, a khaki hat.
So fabulous. Next. Oh,
Japanesey,
yes.
Japanesery,
Yes.
Japanerie. And this was featured at the Met when the Met did a beautiful show. What's it called? Behind the Looking Glass or something?
Well, the China show.
The China show. Some of these were featured. And you just don't know. He loved to recreate his own idea of technique and silhouette. So you don't know where the coat or jacket begins and ends. I must say, a client would be kind of confused about trying to put that on, but it's very beautiful. Because you don't know where's the sleeve, where do you put yourself in it, but it's so beautiful. It's a poem, it's a work of art. And this is the most extraordinary moments in fashion that, alas, Robert has captured in this beautiful book that you can keep forever. And look at the shoes, just look at those Dior shoes. I mean, it must take 4 people to lace you up in the shoes. And then you have to
look in there, you've got the prisoner shoes.
Bondage shoes, bondagey.
Exactly.
And you've got some fur underneath there, and you've got these beautiful Japanese-inspired prints. And these girls, you can't recognize the girls, but you just know that they're feeling fabulous.
It's a kind of fashion you just don't see anymore.
You never see. And last, this was a great moment. This was the golden age of fashion in Paris.
Yes.
And Robert and I lived through the golden age.
Yes. Let's look at the next one. Continuing the fabulousness.
Yes, look at this.
Hardcore romance.
Look at the beautiful poetry of those peony pink petals of ruffles. He pushed the workrooms. He pushed the Dior workrooms. He always started with the foundation of Mr. Dior's great moments of the bar suit and the A line, all those great Dior moments in the history of Dior. And he pushed them, and he kept pushing and pushing them to the cliff, and then they would come up with these one. And this maybe had been started out as something very simple, and he went back and just pushed and pushed and pushed. Notice he pushed, and then he put the bag with it because the bags were very important to Mr. Arnault. Push those bags.
Yes, and I mean, apparently John referred to this backstage as the sex robots collection. Yet another layer of...
Yes, but also when you look at that makeup, there were conversations with Pat McGrath. By the way, Pat McGrath is an extraordinary makeup genius. And she would arrive in Paris, and she would stay at the Ritz. And one day, I stayed at the Ritz as well, and I saw this extraordinary amount of luggage being delivered into the Ritz. And I said, well, whose bags are those? Right? And they were not Vuitton, but they were black, big canvas bags. And they said to me, that's Miss McGrath. And there were like 80 suitcases. And I said, well, she's only here for 10 days. What is in those bags? So I rang up Miss McGrath, and I said, what are you doing with 80 suitcases? And, those were suitcases full of books. She opened them. She took me downstairs in the basement. Books, Irving Penn, Avedon, Horst, Francois Naz, books, videos, albums, books, records. So in the middle of the night when she doesn't sleep, she's just being inspired by art and painting, books, history, everything. And this is what she comes up with. Look at that eye. I mean,
genius.
Who would ever put this here, eyelashes here, and then eyelashes here, and then something over there and up there and all of that? And that took a lot of work.
It's a little bit kabuki, but then surreal kabuki.
Very surreal, yes, postmodern kabuki.
Next. Continuing more kind of kabuki-esque wonderful things.
Yes. He loved Japan. He loved Japan. And there's some sort of koi fish there and very black. Look at those red gloves. And
And the shoes,
Yes.
again.
Always, everything is pulled together for each outfit. He's not going to let the girl go out there without being a complete look.
Well, and again, John said for this collection, he said, this is not a natural look. Like memo to Pat, we want to go completely artificial.
Yes. I love the little mouth, the little Clarabelle mouth.
Yes.
Mouth.
Well, and people talk about, cultural appropriation, but when you see it at such a high level, it's just transfigured.
It's just incredible. It's transformative, and the shows are they were wonderful.
Now you can do the next one. Okay, now this show was the new dance.
He was inspired by dance.
So obviously you can see ballet in here.
A rehearsal at the bar with the mitts, the great cashmere mitt.
Right.
Again, the eyelashes, the pat, and the wool hat, the rehearsal hat. And of course the fur for the luxury and the glamour of it. He was he loved the idea of femininity, and he loved the idea of sexy and sensuality in poetry, but he also loved the idea that couture was luxury, and he just pushed it to the level that it pleased him. And so this is why he was such a troubled poet. He was like a great poet. And when you went to a Galliano show, backstage or out in front of the stage, it was like going to a great art exhibit. It was like going to the beautiful museums in Paris and maybe seeing a Picasso show or a Manet or Monet. It was like a great cultural experience to go to the Dior shows, yes.
And this whole collection, I mean, it's not just ballet. He did flamenco, he did can-can.
He did comedy, yes.
They had a show in Normandy of some of his
Yes.
It was gorgeous.
He did also the most beautiful Egyptian-inspired clothes,
Yes.
Cleopatra.
The next slide, I believe, we're going to Egypt.
Yeah, now look.
The clients did not buy that straight off.
No, the clients were not having that. But look, Tutankhamun and Verushka, the idea of Verushka from Vogue, the hairdo. I mean, it's amazing. And the 3 layers of eyebrow and all the eyeshadow and the makeup matching the scarabs and the this and the that. But it just turns into one big fabulous image of beauty. Look at that hand over there, finessing the Verushka coif.
Yes.
The coiffure inspired by Verushka. But that was a great show to see. And I'm sure the clothes were very heavy at that show. I hope we have a slide of the great show that was inspired by Sissy, the Empress of Austria.
Oh, yes, we do. We do. We have one of that.
That was one of my favorites.
But this one, I mean, he'd gone on a trip to Egypt.
Yes.
But this is so far beyond the normal designer travels.
And by the way, Mr. Galliano was very lucky to have Mr. Arnault allow him to do this, because that thing under the chin must have cost a fortune to reproduce.
Yeah.
Just for the show. No one's buying that in the boutique. What is that called? A king's something.
Artificial king's beard.
Oh, yeah.
Next. Oh, Edwardian teddy boys.
Yes, the teddy boys.
So cute.
Yes.
This is really, really cute.
Fun. This is fun. Again, he loved that Clarabelle mouth, that pouty Clarabelle mouth, but he loved the exaggerated details of collars and flourishes and beautiful colors and fabrics, the mix of colors, the mix of textures of fabrics. You see that blazer is elongated like a teddy boy, it's like a teddy boy with the flaps and the big button and the sequins and all of that. Just extraordinary. I think that is ready to wear. Is that not?
I'm not sure, because there were some things that were Poiret inspired on other pages.
Okay.
It was kind of Poiret meets Elvis Presley.
Yes.
So fabulous.
Yes.
Next. Here's Sissy.
This is a great collection.
This is brilliant.
This is a brilliant collection, and I'm happy that Robert was backstage. This is one show. I always went backstage at John's shows because that's where it was really happening. But this was one show, I'll give you a great anecdote, where I had to sit outside. And this show was the Sissy Empress show, and it was just, gowns were as huge as birthday cakes. I mean, and I was assigned to help First Lady Melania Trump, who came into the Vogue offices one day, and I went to call her into her office, and there was Melania Trump sitting without the president and her PR person, and Anna says, "André, you're going to Paris with Melania. Help her pick out her wedding dress." And I said, okay. And then she was she was not the first lady. So there was July in Paris, and we went to all the collections, and I knew when she saw the Dior, the Sissy Empress of Austria show, she was going to pick a wedding dress from that collection. And she did indeed pick the wedding dress from that collection. And the dress was 2 dresses in one, and she fitted the dress in New York one day, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon with a break for lunch. She stood, and the fitters from the workrooms, and the undergarment of the dress was an evening gown unto itself. And then she put over that the big dress. And she walked in the dress, and it was beautiful. It was all white. There were so many beautiful dresses in that collection. And that show had music by Elvis Presley and Little Richard, and it was just amazing. And by that time, Dior was so big, they had so many people to invite to the shows, that they were held in a tent. Somewhere in the place where you go to ride horses. Deborah, where were they then by then? You know. They were outside of Paris in the Jeu de Paume.
Oh, in Chantilly or something.
Oh, someplace like that. And they were huge tents. And I never paid attention to where we were going. I just went to the show. But do you notice that exaggerated poitrine?
Yes.
It's inspired very much by something of... Gaultier used to do that, but it's not like inspired by Gaultier at all. And that rich, sumptuous fabric, like Henry VIII, sort of a Henry VIII kind of brocade and fur, it's always layer upon layer. It's rich. It's like a rich souffle that doesn't fall.
And of course, Empress Sissy herself, Austro-Hungarian Empress, was such an iconic figure with her 19-inch waist and her horseback riding and being assassinated.
Assassinated and knife stuck into a beautiful little black 19-inch waist jacket and all of that. And that's what John loved, the stories of people like that. He once had a show, I asked Robert, I said, where are your pictures of the great show inspired by Casati, the Marchese Casati at the Paris Opera? There were dresses, like 50 yards of dresses, strapless. He said that was unfortunately, they wouldn't let me in to photograph that. And there, the clothes were extraordinary. Started by this eccentric who used to go running around at night in Milan, nude with a fur coat.
Yes. We featured one of those Casati dresses in the Gothic show.
Yes.
And I was taking these Italian men around, and they didn't get it. They kept going, is this Halloween? And then they saw the Casati, and they went, oh, the Marchese Casati. La decadence.
La decadence.
And then suddenly they got it.
Yeah.
We can get the next one. Empress Josephine.
And pregnant. And look at those models lined up with the Josephine Napoleonic look. And pregnant. And look at the shoes. The shoes are very much in period, those stubby-toed shoes. I mean, he just would take inspirations like that and just push it and push it and push it. And yet the hairdo is somewhat the Bride of Frankenstein. It's not Empress of Josephine. And it all works. It all works. It's poetry. You might think it's like Disney, but it's beyond Disney.
No, and you can really tell, though, that he did his homework as a student at Central St. Martin's. He did a ton of fashion history research.
He learned at St. Martin's.
Next. This is so beautiful.
Yes.
This was the one where it was inspired by Dior's mother and the whole Edwardian world.
Yes. And Cecil B. And you see, look over there, there's a model that's off the screen. Yep. Look at that detail on whatever she's wearing. Is a slip?
It looks like the Susie Sphinx collection that he did himself.
Yes. But the details of this, and I think that's Stella Tennant. And look at those hats. They're right out of a Cecil Beaton something. Totally. A picture, or a film, or something, or a recounting, or a moment. And just excessiveness and beauty.
But it's so fascinating because Dior himself was so obsessed with his mother and the Belle Epoque. And here you see John like cycling back and doing his version of that.
But his version is slightly saucier because you see through. Everything is transparent.
Quite a bit.
Dior would never make dresses like that. They were that totally transparent. You're wearing your evening dresses, your lingerie. It's like lingerie. Couture is lingerie. And let me just go into the detail. At the House of Dior, and I learned this when Mr. Ferré was working at Dior, the deceased Mr. Ferré, they were the only house in Paris that had a workroom where they made their own umbrellas. So if a client wanted a beautiful parasol to go with her bar suit, she could order the parasol at Dior and have it made. And there you see those parasols have been made at Dior. They have been, that's a special moment.
Yeah. Next. Oh.
Fetish and bondage and sex. Blood.
Right.
Blood.
What fashion's all about.
Blood. Give your blood. And what is that called?
B-O-U-L. I'm not sure. This is from the French, another French Revolution
Yes, the guillotine.
The guillotine, exactly. Let's see the next one. You'll see more, but that's very de Sade inspired. Yes. So you have the panniers.
Bold,
and
very bold.
Just fabulous.
Very, very bold. And yet very vampire Gothic with that black cross.
Really this is one of the most amazing collections.
Out of this world.
With this Lesage embroidery and black sort of like beads.
and the panniers. You know, everything is exaggerated and historically accurate. And there are people backstage fussing over these girls, and they never had so much attention given to them in a cabine. In most cabines, they just have quietness and people in smocks putting on those beautiful suits and tailored evening gowns. But here you got to have at least an army of assistants fighting to get you into that look. Cinch that belt. Who can put that belt on you? And that collar must be up. And John is running around making sure every detail is perfect before it goes out.
And the fact that from his very first student collection at Central St. Martin's about the Incroyable, he was really into the French Revolution.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And apparently this collection, there had been unrest in France, and that led him to think that year again about the French Revolution.
Yes.
Next. God, I love this show. I was in the couture for this, and it was all the armor, which Stephen Jones made the armor. Can you imagine?
Really?
That's what he said. And I remember in the audience, people were going, this is crazy, who could wear this? And I'm jumping up and down in my seat because I was doing a show about the weaponized woman. And I called up Dior right after the show and I said, I have to have this in my show in September. And they're like, Valerie, it is July. You can't have it in September. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I have to get this in my show. So they contacted John, and he said, oh, yeah, lend it to the show. They contacted Mr. Arnault, and finally they said, okay, we'll send it to you.
Without the armor.
Well, no, with the armor. We had to have the armor because it was about a weaponized woman, a warrior woman. But it only arrived 2 days before the show. But they'd given us all the measurements, and we unpacked it the day before the show and put it on the mannequins. They were that organized. It was fabulous.
Yeah. And notice that the girl has to have 2 assistants helping her off the runway, because if not, she'd topple over.
Exactly. Next.
Oh, God. One of the most extraordinary things, inspired by Madame Butterfly and who was that famous opera? There was a man. It's a man who was in the opera.
You mean M. Butterfly? No.
It's Madame Butterfly.
Madame Butterfly is the original Puccini opera.
But he came out dressed as the man from...
Oh, Pinkerton. The worst villain in opera history. Yes, you're right. He came out as Pinkerton at the end of the show.
But you see, this is extraordinary because this is the workmanship of pushing origami concepts and conceits. And so this dress is based on origami. So there's origami everywhere. You can't, it was just amazing to see this thing unfurl. And Miss Deborah Shaw was in this collection, weren't you, Deborah? I remember you very well. Is Deborah, where are you? You'll see the lights come up. But Deborah had some of the most beautiful clothes. You had one of those horizontally worked evening dresses, correct? Yes? Chartreuse, layers and layers, beautiful. And there was a mirror, and it was slowly, it was on a rotating motor, and you'd slowly, and there were Dior chairs, and they would come down, and this beautiful music, and there were even crocodile clothes, bias-cut crocodile clothes. I mean, crocodile suits and jackets, and huge, ugly platform wooden shoes. But look how beautiful the makeup is, and this orientally inspired hair thing, ornament, and look at the eyebrows and everything. But it was just so beautiful, and it was one of the best shows ever, and he did beautiful coats inspired by Japanese 18th century woodcut prints. The evening dresses were just amazing, and he still works that today in that kind of concept of those pleated evening dresses.
Really, this is a magnificent
I hope you have another picture of this show.
I think this is the only one of this show.
Okay.
So many good photos. Next picture?
Well, you have to buy the book.
The book is really brilliant.
That's the religieuse, that's called religieuse. And that is a beautifully worked workmanship of the Maison Dior. And these girls take themselves seriously when they're posing for Romanticism because they know it's about to be their moment on the runway. Look at that beautiful, beautiful gazelle strapless dress. And I remember Deborah had one similar, but it was in chartreuse. And these dresses were sent to New York, and they were in the windows of Dior up on 57th Street. And this was very popular. I think people ordered these dresses because even after he left Dior and went to the Maison Margiela, I think Amal Clooney had a dress that was very much inspired by the technique for one of the Met Galas.
This is so beautiful. It's like millefeuille pastry.
And it's light. It looks heavy, but it's very light.
Next.
Inspired by art. Surrealism, the palette hat.
Yes.
That's the typical magic of Paris. And that huge rose All of it is just so extraordinary and so poetic and imaginative.
It's so beautiful.
It's just such a unique moment.
All his favorite artists and all of Mr. Dior's favorite artists.
Is that Carly Close? Yeah. Carly Close? Yeah. Well, it's some famous model with black lipstick. But look at Robert, he caught the, just in case you had one eye and it had put on so you just see one eye and the mole.
Yeah.
And the pearl choker.
Yes.
And these pictures are important when you're discovering and you're writing a story or you're putting it in Vogue because of the detail of that painterly, what does the painter have? That thing, what's it called?
A palette.
A palette. And the brush is sticking out. That's a hat.
That's a hat. That's a brilliant
That's
hat.
a hat.
Next.
And that's a wrap.
No, we got two more pictures. Let's get the next one because it's the same collection which was done out at Versailles.
Oh, Marie Antoinette,
Yeah.
that's Marie Antoinette's necklace in the bodice.
It's so amazing. Yes, that's
described
right.
by the necklace that brought her down. Mm-hmm. The scandal.
Right.
But this is a beautiful, beautiful collection, true poetry and romanticism, and just the excess of the court of Versailles, the Marie Antoinette moment. And there was a necklace that Marie Antoinette apparently, allegedly bought. She did not.
She did
was
not,
tricked
right.
into getting the necklace, and there started the whole downfall of the whole regime.
Yes, read about it. The secret of that
Because
diamond
with John,
necklace.
everything is history. With John, everything is the history from the past brought up to today. It was all about history and research. And he has loved that. He lives for that. And he reads, and he just loved to discover, like Boldini, and he loved the Marquise de Cossati because she traveled with a beautiful crocodile suitcase, and it was long, long, long. And in the suitcase was her pet boa constrictor. Live.
Next, the last picture, we'll see more art and Klimt.
Klimt and
Madam X.
And just, the afro hair was very Klimt. The color is very Klimt. The gloves are matched. And the excess of the bouffant Dior silhouette. The Dior ball gown from the 50s brought up to 2012 or whatever it was. And the shoe, the nasty yellow shoe.
Yeah. And now we have a few questions here for you, André.
They should be asking questions. What are you going to ask me?
Yeah, they've sent them in. They've sent in the questions. They're collecting more.
Oh, that bright light. Can we turn the lights off or something?
All right. We have a few questions here. First question. What gets you excited about fashion in this moment now?
Oh, in this moment, nothing. I think a show like your show, Paris, would excite me. Any show in a museum. Beautiful shows curated in museums excite me more than fashion itself. The thing that excites me about fashion is, and I'm still very much passionate and interested in it. I don't go to Paris anymore for the collections. Sadly, I miss them sometimes, but I do think that what is extraordinary in fashion now are personalities that matter. And one of the great personalities is Rihanna. And Rihanna gave a show last September, a Savage Fenty Beauty, in the Barclay Center in Brooklyn. And I was privileged to go. I'd never been to a Rihanna fashion extravaganza. And I sat backstage for the whole show. I was backstage. And I saw the show unfurl and become this extraordinary show of inclusiveness, diversity, and she decimated she took the history of sexy lingerie that had been for years expressed at Victoria's Secret and turned it into Fenty Beauty. But what was great about her, and she created the show herself with her team, is that she really had the big girls, the super plus size girls. And they were as important as to the whole spectrum of the show as the slim beauties like the great models. And then she had transgendered models. And what was so extraordinary, she had twins that were of Asian ethnicity. Then suddenly the girls would come out and there would be Laverne Cox flipping and twerking and carrying on. And then suddenly somebody's walking by in the background and it is a paraplegic model. It is a model who has an artificial leg And she is as beautiful and has as much attention drawn on her as Laverne Cox. And this show and Backstage, it was just so extraordinary to see her vision come alive in the show. That excites me if I go to a show like that, but I think museum shows are where the real excitement is. And I guess there must be still some excitement in Paris. I see sometimes pictures that I think are great. I don't know. But you know what? The thing that excites me, that really gets me going, and I hope that you all will share this, The Crown. I am addicted to The Crown. Series 3, Olivia Colman. I woke up, it launched on Netflix on November 17th. And so it was on a Sunday. And I waited till 12 o'clock midnight to turn Netflix on, and it had not been put on. So I woke up again at 3 o'clock, and it was on. So I have to go to church, and my church starts at 9:30. I saw 3 episodes before I left to go to church, and I came back from church and I saw all the rest of the 7 episodes. But The Crown represents something that John represented, to bring it back to fashion, because it's a quality. There is a passion, and the person who wrote The Crown, the dialogue, the costumes, the lighting, the locations, it is all perfection. It is a moment in the history of television. I think it's the best thing I've ever seen in television. You know, you used to say Masterpiece Theater was so great. Well, if you just tune into The Crown, you will have happy moments, especially during the holiday season. And I say in Series 3, Helena Bonham Carter is wonderful. The clothes are exceptional. The clothes of Princess Margaret, the clothes of Olivia Colman, and in Series 1 and 2, they were great. So that's what excites me, The Crown. And everywhere I go, we talk about The Crown, so that's what excites me.
We take a few more questions? Yeah. Okay. What's your opinion of cultural appropriation?
Well, I think cultural appropriation is a very iffy, whoever asked that was a very good question. I mean, I'll answer it. But I think it's important to be very careful how you tread in cultural appropriation. And people have been made aware that they've got to do their homework.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. You know, Gucci has a board. Gucci has installed a huge paying board, a consultation of fashion experts who give them advice on what to do that's appropriate and it's not appropriate, after they had the scandal of that ski mask. I think this is very important. I think that Prada has Ava DuVernay, the great filmmaker, is on their board. And I think this is very important. And I think it's important to do it properly and with respect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question here. As the decade comes to an end and a new one beckons, are there any designers of today that have captured the essence of theatrics in their designs and runway shows?
Well, John Galliano, he still does at Margiela. I think Mr. Galliano has to take the credit. And luckily, we have these books of Robert Farrar, because he's not only done a book on Galliano, he did a book on McQueen, he did a book on Marc Jacobs. Marc Jacobs does it too. He has great theatrics, and he's done a book on Marc Jacobs. I think Marc Jacobs is one of the great ones. He's one of the great ones, and he's happy, he's married, so everything. Oh, that lady has a fabulous hat, darling. You could have been a Galliano model. Who are you? With a cape. You look divine. Oh, you dressed up to see this. Oh, I love a lady in a hat. Anyway, I think that Mr. Jacobs is one of the great talents, and I think that Mr. Galliano is one of the great talents. Nicolas Ghesquière. I think that Mr. Lee McQueen was exceptional, but he parted the ways. And I was never a friend of Alexander McQueen, but I knew his friends, the circle that his friend, one of his great friends was Isabella Blow. She discovered Alexander McQueen, actually. And he was extremely talented, extremely talented. Kind of prickly, the clothes were thorny and prickly, very subtle, kind of masochistic. But anyway, they were beautiful. They were poems. Now, can we take questions from the audience? I like to talk to people.
No, we can. There's someone reaching out in the white shirt back there. Yes.
Hi, I want to know which of the collections, I wrote some questions up. I want to know which of the collections that John Galliano did is your favorite and why.
Well, I'll have to say to you that the collection he did, and that unfortunately Robert didn't photograph, was March 1994, of 17 looks at the house of Madame Schlumberger, a famous house. It was empty, and there were 17 looks, and they were also inspired by Japanese fashion and culture, the kimono, the obi, and we just gotten $50,000 to do that collection. and he did it in 2 weeks. And he and Amanda turned around and they recreated fashion with that collection, March 1994. And I was a part of it. Vogue was a part of it. Anna went to let me just, I would go feed them with McDonald's. I'd go to the petty cash at Vogue and go get 50 hamburgers and feed the team. And it was just an extraordinary moment in fashion. And Amanda Harlock had all the jewelers of Paris in Madame Schlumberger's house on the 3rd floor with bodyguards. All the jewelry of Cartier, all the jewelry of Van Cleef, all the jewelry of Harry Winston, a brooch here on a cloche. Just jewelry, and real jewelry done like costume jewelry, because she might throw a diamond pin back here on a train or a bus or something, we just might miss it. And Manolo of the shoes, and the shoes were done in London. The shoes were inspired by Brancusi sculpture, and they were heels that were like nails. And the models were they volunteered everything. I mean, Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, Naomi Campbell, and they all, and there was a young model starting at the time. Her name was Nadia Auermann, and she had just become big at Vogue. And so about 4 days before the show, John and Stephen and I were going somewhere to buy something, and I said, John, you have to have Nadia Auermann in the show. He says, who is that? I said, well, she's this very tall German girl. And he says, well, I don't know her, so have her come in, and maybe we'll see have a go see. So I had Nadia come in, and he says, oh, we don't like her. I said, John, you have to have Nadia Auermann in the show. Well, I don't like her. I said, John, Nadia Auermann has an 8-page spread in Vogue. You'd have to have her in the show. You don't want Anna Wintour coming sitting here on your front row and not saying Nadia Auermann. Okay. He took his shearling coat. He had a shearling coat, like a shearling bomber coat. And he was wearing the coat, and we went into this restaurant, but he wore his coat upside down. He turned it upside down, so the big collar was actually the bottom of the coat. And he recreated that in black shearling for Nadia. And that was her look, with a closed hat, with a big diamond pin from Bois Cartier or something, and these little skinny nail heels, and that's how Nadia started to be big. Nadia Auermann. And it was just a great show. And the music was by Jeremy, and Jeremy was a great friend of John, and the music was extraordinary. And we had 2 shows. I think we had one at 9:30 and one at 11:30. And at 9:30 we had Vogue and New York Times, and at 11:30 we had the so-called social world of Paris, the Georgina Brandolinis, the Irina Meek, and all the young people who wanted to come and buy the clothes. And we had John Franco Ferré. He came to the show. Mr. Ferré actually came to the show. I said, Mr. Ferré, you've got to come in here and see this clothes. You've got to see this collection. And of course he came. And it was just fabulous.
More questions.
Okay.
One person writes, this is a good question. How do you think that John's current appointment at Margiela relates to the work he did at Dior?
It's exceptional that what John does, because he continues to push himself. And when I see people wearing the clothes, I know that he has pushed himself. Particularly, Amal Clooney has had several dresses from Margiela. And then I sometimes look at the Margiela collections on the computer. And I think one of the last ones was about 2 years ago, and I really understood what John was doing to evolve his look. And it was quite amazing. And Vanessa Friedman from the New York Times said to me, she goes to the show, she said, yes, it was a really great show. So I think he understands that he's a master, he's like a magician. He's like the man who created the Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, he creates his own fashion, and it permeates and resonates and percolates down to the world. It may not percolate down to everyone, but it certainly is romantic, and we need romance.
Question here. Do you think that we'll ever have a resurgence of decadence in the fashion industry?
I hope so. I would hope so. I hope so. I mean, everything that is beautiful comes from something extreme. I mean, the golden age of fashion, and I was lucky to say I was very young, but when I saw my first Izzy Nalaya show, I'd never seen anything like it. And Izzy Nalaya was a great designer as well. And when Karl Lagerfeld went to Chanel, that was in '83. That was something I'd never seen extraordinary. Look what he built out of that. And so there are people who still have that kind of decadence somehow. The Valentino designer, Piero Paolo, can create that kind of moment in his collections for couture. And Valentino also had that. He was a great designer. I always loved Valentino for the exquisite workmanship of a coat as well as an evening dress. So I think it does. But as you know, fashion today is made from the street. It's made from a moment in Instagram. And so there is Rihanna, there is Beyonce doing her formation or doing a video, and it becomes very important to the world. And there is, of course, you may not want me to say it, but Miss Kim Kardashian, who is very influential. Who went She's very influential. She's on the cover of New York Magazine this month. Very, very influential.
Question here. What do you think of the current collections at Dior?
No comment. Oh, they're nice.
Your book, ALT, had a lot of wonderful photographs in
Oh,
it.
thank you.
And they're wondering whether you plan to release another book with more pictures?
Yes, I have a book coming out next spring.
Yay! Fabulous.
Chiffon Trenches. It's called Chiffon Trenches. And that was my invention, chiffon trenches. I've survived decades in the chiffon trenches like a soldier in the war. And that people love the title, and it was in my first book, and it's not the title of my second book. And there are scores and scores of pictures are heavily researched, and I'm very proud of the book. I'm meeting with my publisher tomorrow to go over the layouts. So that's coming out next spring. Look for it.
That's fabulous news.
Thank you. But this evening isn't about me, it's about Robert Farah. What are we suddenly asking me questions for?
Well, and what I should point out now is that Robert will be signing his book, and André will be out there also. It's right outside the doors. So after our last question here, which is for you, which is a very simple one, which is, who made your beautiful red puffer coat?
Norma Kamali!
Yay!
And by the way, may I say, as an American designer, she excites me. Norma Kamali is the unsung heroine of America couture. And she is a woman who survived through decades and decades, and her store has all the pop stuff. And she was never really appreciated, even in the heydays of Studio 54. And if you go online, Norma Kamali has it all: vintage, beauty, makeup. It's extraordinary. And I have 3 of those red coats. I have 3, and another kind of coat is sort of gray, and that is a coat. And I used to have beautiful coats in sable made by Karl Lagerfeld, and there's nothing like that red coat. It goes everywhere with me.
Would you join me in thanking André Leon Talley?
Could I just say, I want to say one thing. Deborah, stand up. Deborah Shaw, stand up. Stand up, Deborah. Stand up. Come up stage. Come up here. Please. Come up. Get up and come up. Get up, please. Quickly. They got to go outside and sign the books. Deborah was one of John's favorite models. And Deborah did the Galliano shows when he had no money. And, she was suddenly discovered. And look at this long drink of water called Deborah Shaw. Wait, come over here, darling. Let me see you in the limelight. Deborah came all the way from Paris with her friend. Let's get over there. I want to see you. She still has the best silhouette. Look at her. And John adored her, and John loved her, and she was in that marvelous show with the Japanese show, Madame Butterfly. And other ones, too. You in shows when the very first show. Yes, the Messiah, the couture. And so she has a great history with John. And when John loved the model, he was loyal to them. He had the best of the best silhouettes. He didn't just go for the standard looks. And the models wanted to be in his shows. Christy Turlington and Linda Evangelista, these girls did these shows for free, Linda Evangelista. And that first show, Linda Evangelista was wearing a blazer and nothing else. And then she had a little kabuki hat, a little Japanese hat, and some chopsticks stuck in the hat, and Pat McGrath, beautiful makeup, and an obi, a big obi around her waist, and these skinny heels. So this is the golden age of history, ladies and gentlemen, and you will get it if you buy the book. You will be transferred into the golden age of Paris history. Thank you, Robert, for doing this book.